Hello, and once again, thank you for being with me. Today, my talk revolves around the story in Matthew's Gospel about the feeding of the 5,000, obviously one of Jesus' more dramatic miracles and one that's spoken about more often than others. And it also follows on from the parables we've been dealing with in the recent talks about the salt of the earth, the yeast in the dough, and so on. And what I want to reflect on is where exactly our faith is taking us at this time, just exactly what we're focusing on. Quite often, I hear people being very disheartened, especially older people like me, who seem to feel that things are coming apart as far as religion and faith are concerned. And I was reading something very interesting the other day that involves the youth. And if you're a young person, I ask that you stay to let me explain this quotation because it has something very interesting about it. And it's from a thing written by a man called Tommaso, who was one of St. Francis's first followers, St. Francis of Assisi. So he was writing in the early 13th century, or the first part of the 13th century. And he says, unfortunately today, all of them, the youth, are like that. They learn to swear from when they're infants, and they grow up believing that all is their due. As far as bad things are concerned, they engage in them even before adolescence. And it's a criticism that I hear very often today from people, and yet we find that he was writing these words all that time ago. And in fact, the author of the book that I found this in, which is The Life of St. Francis by Alessandro Barbero, was saying that the same sentiments were expressed by Seneca, who is better known among Italians, but he was a man who died in the year 65 AD, and so was there at the time of Christ, we could say. And also by a man of the stature of St. Augustine. And St. Augustine died in the year 430, so we take it was the early 5th century that he was already saying the same type of thing about the youth. And so this feeling and this criticism among people is nothing new. It's something that we've had with us for some time, it seems. And so what I'm saying is that all of these things that we hear, people say, no, we don't know what's going to happen. Are things going to come to an end? This is what it seems like looking at the future. We have to perhaps look more closely at what we're counting on, where our faith lies. Because you see, we're so affected by the world today that what we base our conception on are figures, really. It's all about data these days. And so success is measured in terms of numbers or lack of numbers. And so when we look at the dwindling numbers of people, for example, coming to church, we can start to feel desperate that this is not working. What we do forget, though, is, as I've said in recent weeks, the parables that Jesus tells about the salt of the earth, about the leaven in the dough, and so on, is all about how we're not meant to be everything in the world. We're not meant to be that numerous. In the 12th chapter of St. Luke's Gospel at verse 32, he calls us his little flock, but we want to be the whole people. He refers to leaven in the dough, but we're not happy with just doing that. We want to be everything. We want to be the whole loaf. He talks about the salt of the earth, and we're not happy to be salt that brings out the beauty in others. We want to be the leading force in the world. And this is the thing that we're looking at our faith, as I say, from a very modern point of view, a very much a current point of view of the world. However, if we look nicely at the story of the feeding of the 5,000, it brings out something very interesting about the difference between man's approach and God's approach. Man's approach is when it's coming to evening time and Jesus says to the apostles, we'll have to give these people something to eat. The first thing they think about, and probably we would think about too, is to disperse the crowd, send them away, let them go and find their own food. Whereas God's approach is, no, let's be together. Let's work on growing together. Let's work on spending time together. on sharing a meal together, and so on. And this is something that is terribly important to him. And we can say, yes, but how would we do that? And of course, there again, this miracle answers that question, that if we feel we're inadequate to the task, can you imagine what the apostles felt like when they were sitting? The parable, this miracle account says 5,000, counting only the men, do not count women and children, so we assume there were more than 10,000 people. And if you were sitting there with 2 fish and 5 loaves, you would say to him, well, go on, what are we going to do with this huge crowd, that we have in front of us? And yet, it was the fact that they did bring those 5 loaves and those 2 fish forward and put them in the hands of Jesus, that he was able to do that miracle. He was able to provide that outcome where not only was everyone fed and fed sufficiently, but we're told there were 12 baskets of leftovers. And so his answer, once they put that stuff in his hands, was to give not only enough, but more than enough. And so what we need to work on as spiritual people, and perhaps as religious people, if you're a religious person, is to think about our faith in God, whether we really believe in him or we don't, whether we're prepared to be the little flock, but a holy little flock, a people who work more on their holiness than on their numbers, people who are there to be this leaven in the bread that will let things develop, people who are prepared to take their littleness, the little they have to offer, and to put that in God's hands and let him produce what is necessary in the world. And he's promised us in showing us this miracle that he will produce not only what's required, but more than enough. And that faith will carry us forward and give us a more positive view of the future. And I hope that this will help you to look ahead more positively, and despite the troubles that there are in our world, to believe that God is there, and all it needs is for us to put what we have in his hands, and things will come right. And may God bless you. Thank you.